Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to welcome the representatives from the Bank of Canada and Department of Finance, and thanks for being with us today. While it's a sunny day in Ottawa, dark clouds, storm clouds are looming across Canada as the Liberal government's inflationary spending has driven interest and mortgage rates way up. All of this borrowed money and an astronomical annual interest payment of $53 billion on a $1.3 trillion of debt. Canada is now spending more on debt interest than on health transfers. It's so sad to see more money being given to bankers and bondholders than to the provinces to pay nurses and doctors in our healthcare system, an unfortunate reality in my home province of New Brunswick. Would the Senior Deputy Governor agree Canada's inflation problem, national debt problem, and endless annual deficits under the Liberal government are closely related in damaging Canada's overall fiscal position?
I'm sorry, repeat your question, sir?
Would the Senior Deputy Governor agree Canada's inflation problem, national debt problem, and endless annual deficits under the Liberal government are closely related in damaging Canada's overall fiscal position?
I'm happy to give you the bank's view on what is causing inflation, what has caused inflation, what is still causing inflation. Inflation started in Canada, as it started in many countries around the world, as a result of the conditions I described earlier. We had, as a result of the pandemic, we had a number of supply chain problems. We had a global shock to the economy with the invasion of Ukraine that drove it.
With all due respect, number one, that's not the question I asked. And number two, when you print money, that also drives up inflation. So we could go there and just stay there and talk about how, even though there might have been slight inflation, the current government made inflation much higher by printing money, which drove up the cost of goods and made fewer goods. And I think that's an important point. So if you're not comfortable answering that question, I'll move on to the next one. Last week, the Governor of the Bank of Canada confirmed the Liberal government's $61 billion in new spending is not helpful in bringing inflation down and lowering interest rates. And as I've just said, the Liberal government contributed heavily to the inflation by printing money. The latest wacko spending budget brought in by Finance Minister Freeland did not stop the inflationary deficits that are driving interest rates up sky high. It will not stop endangering our social programs and jobs by adding more and more debt. Over the past 9 years, the Liberal government has doubled rent, mortgage payments, and down payments. While life has gotten worse for all Canadians, the Liberal government is spending more than ever before, including $61 billion in reckless new inflationary spending. This is costing the average Canadian family an extra $3,687 per year. Former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge said this is the worst budget since 1982. Does the Senior Deputy Governor agree struggling families cannot afford higher taxes and more inflationary spending that drives up the cost of everything and keeps interest rates so high?
I would agree it's been a very difficult time for Canadian households the last few years. The combination of high inflation and the response to high inflation, increase in interest rates, has been very difficult for Canadian families. Absolutely.
How much time?
1:20.
Despite a record of 9 years of failure, the Liberal government has doubled down on the same spending that has caused so much misery in the first place, pouring even more fuel on the inflationary fire and driving up interest rates. Does the Senior Deputy Director agree that instead of giving more money to bankers and bondholders, we should be investing in our doctors and nurses?
The Senior Deputy Governor doesn't make those decisions.
That's fair. Do you agree with it, though, the statement?
I don't make those decisions, so I don't weigh those choices. That's not my job.
So you don't have an opinion on it. Okay. Last week, the Bank of Canada Governor also warned Canadians that unaffordable housing will continue into the future. This follows a recent report from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which confirmed that housing construction is plummeting as prices get more expensive. Under this current government, housing starts will be lower in 2025-26 than they were in 2020-2021. On top of this, the CMHC forecasted that rents will rise and vacancy rates will fall as more people compete for less housing. Does the Senior Deputy Director agree that Liberal government are simply not building enough homes for Canadians to live in?
The Senior Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada would agree that we have a housing supply shortage in this country, and it is driving up the price of housing, one of the things that's adding to the difficulty for many households. That supply problem in housing has been with us for a long time, and it's not something that can be fixed quickly. Supply of houses is something that's going to take a long time and a concerted effort and a lot of cooperation from different levels of government to fix. And we're pleased to see that cooperation is accelerating.
Thank you very much. That is the time.